In this video, let's look at some wins and losses from the Chiefs and Colts game, take a look at a couple former Chiefs wide receivers to evaluate how they are doing without Mahomes, look at some stats on Mahomes in his dropbacks when pressured and against the blitz, some miscellaneous AFC West updates, and much freaking more. But first, how about those? What's up, guys? My name is Cole, and I do daily news about the Kansas City Chiefs, so make sure to sub if you're new, hit that like button, you know the freaking deal. And let's get into this video. We're going to cover a flurry of topics from notes that I've jotted down here. First off, PFF has Creed Humphrey listed as the #1 graded center in all of the NFL. Now, PFF is a divisive topic these days. We've kind of gone in on them at times. I have said I like PFF in a variety of ways, except for how they grade their QBs, which does not account for a lot of things. I've dove into that in more detail in previous videos, so not here to really talk about that, but it was just cool to give a nod to Creed Humphrey, who has played pretty well this season. He has had a couple mishaps recently, but nothing too crazy. Just want to shine some light on our center, Creed Humphrey, when you have some of the other offensive line maybe not shining too great. I do want to note, since we're talking about the offensive line, that a lot of people have talked about the Chiefs' O-line not really holding up well against the Colts, and I did find this stat. The Colts pressured Mahomes on 16 of his 46 dropbacks, and he completed just 3 of 12 passes for 65 yards on those plays. So hats off to the Colts defense. They were able to pressure Mahomes on nearly 33% of his dropbacks. That seems like a lot to me. And on the subject of dropbacks, I found this interesting stat. It's a PFF stat, okay? Don't get too mad at me here, but these are interesting stats. This is Mahomes on dropbacks. When it's a regular dropback, no pressure, no blitz, he targets receivers 85% of the time, scrambles 5%, throws the ball away 6%, and then 5% of those passes are batted down or broken up in completions. Now, against pressured dropbacks, he targets receivers 72% of the time, scrambles 6% of the time, throws the ball away 16% of the time, one of the highest percentages for QBs on throwaways, but I don't really mind that. It's safe. He's being safe. And then 2% batted down, broken in completion. Now, Mahomes against the blitz, 95% of the time, completes to his target against the blitz, no throwaways, 3% scramble rate, and only 3% of passes are batted down and broken in completion. So what can you take away from this? Mahomes is great in normal situations, pretty good against pressured dropbacks, I would say above average, and absolutely phenomenal against the blitz. So I just found those stats pretty cool and worth looking at. Another thing I found interesting enough to share with you guys is a guy named Joseph Hefe on Twitter. He shared a couple graphs of the offensive snap count. He called it a pillbox chart for KC versus Indianapolis. He did it for both the offense and the defense. And I won't bore you with all the details here, but a couple of his notes. He says, interestingly, all but one of Justin Watson's snaps were pass plays, while only 3 of Skyy More's snaps were pass plays. Jody Fortson also not used as a run blocker. And then as far as the defensive chart for Kansas City, Brian Cook was in almost exclusively on third down pass plays. Leo Chanel pretty much only on run plays, and Brian Cook and Chanel were never on the field at the same time. Why? I don't know, but very interesting. And then Skyy Moore snap count. Us here in Kansas City, we were like, can we please see Skyy Moore in the game more? No pun intended on his last name. Well, Eric Bieniemy promised in his presser. He said, hey, I promise you he will have more snaps next game than he had in their game against the Chargers. He had 2 snaps on offense against the Chargers. Well, he was being truthful. Eric Bieniemy was. He had 8 snaps. So 4 times the amount, 8 snaps, but only 3 of those snaps were actually pass plays. So the other 5 he was in were not even pass plays. Good, bad, I don't know. I personally would like to see some more of Skyy Moore in the game. I feel like he's really good of getting separation off the line and would just like to see some sort of a mix up in the receiving core. I'm still doing some diving into the film room on the wide receiver room, but they are definitely still working out the kinks in that regard, both there and with their offensive line, and honestly, in their run game. which we talked about in a previous video. They only had like 32 rushing yards outside of Mahomes' scrambles, and yeah, CEH, 7 rushes for 0 yards. Yikes. There was a play floating around. I'll pull it up right now so you can see it, but there was a play floating around of him on Twitter, missing what looked to be a very big gap. I don't think that was his assigned gap to run in, but it was pretty wide and possibly should have been ran into. Now, I'm just a guy with a beard in my basement, so who am I to really judge? But an interesting thing to note, when you also see Mahomes going like this, go that way. I don't know what to make of that, but it was definitely worth noting. What if I told you the biggest reason why the Chiefs lost against the Colts was not something that happened in the Colts game? What if I told you it was something that happened on the very first play, I believe, against the Cardinals? And it was turf to blame. Harrison Butker, turf. I hate the turf. Do something about it. I looked into what the NFL does to evaluate turf, and they have their own procedure, but I feel like it's not enough. So since we were talking about the Colts, I wanted to just fill you in that I believe one of the biggest reasons why the Chiefs lost that game was because of the Cardinals' turf. I think it's a conspiracy theory between the turf of the Cardinals and the Indianapolis Colts. Gosh dang it. Now, I do want to shout out the Chiefs' defense in the game against the Colts. I don't want to focus only on the negative. The defense looked absolutely phenomenal. Pressured Matt Ryan a ton, sacked him 5 times, 2 fumbles. One was just a turnover on downs, but one was recovered by Kansas City. And both of those fumbles were converted into TDs by the offense because it gave them short field position. So hats off to the defense there. Snead played lights out, sack, fumble recovery. Frank Clark got a sack. Nick Bolton had a couple. They looked really freaking good. Let's be honest there. I think if the defense continues, they're going to be a top 10, top 12 defense. I don't know the stats right off the top of my head. I don't have them pulled up, but man, they look good, and they definitely bailed the Chiefs offense out multiple times, and even the special teams, which we know was the weak spot, and Matt Amendola has been let go. Shared about that last night. We'll see what's next. Is it Harrison Butker? Is it another kicker? There's been no update there, but there is an update, a little bit of an update on this Sunday's game from Soren Petro. He says this: the NFL is going to wait as long as possible to make a decision, most likely tomorrow. If the game is moved, I'm being told Minneapolis is preparing to host the game. I don't know why they're waiting so long. They should probably just move the game. I think from what I read, what I heard, Hurricane Ian, sounds like a very smart hurricane. Ian is a smart guy name. It's supposed to be potentially a level 5 or category 5 hurricane. So stay away from that. Let's not go over there. So we should find out tomorrow whether or not they're going to move it. And if they do, it looks like they're moving it to the Vikings Stadium. So worth noting, there you go. Now I want to talk about a couple former Chiefs receivers, and I will share why in just a second. First off, Byron Pringle. Poor guy was placed on IR. Now, he got signed to the Chicago Bears in the offseason for like $6 million or something like that. And the article says here the Bears on Tuesday placed receiver Byron Pringle on injured reserve and signed linebacker Joe Thomas off their practice squad. Pringle exited Sunday's win over the Texans with a calf injury in the first half after catching one pass for 11 yards. In his first season with the Bears, the 5-year NFL vet has 2 receptions for 33 yards. Pringle must miss a minimum of 4 games, which means he won't be eligible to play until October 30th against the Cowboys in Dallas, blah, blah, blah. But I say all that to say this. Jacob Infante on Twitter said, "I'm crushed that the Bears won't have Byron Pringle these next few weeks. I, for one, will miss his 2 catches in 3 games as a $6 million free agent signing. Devastating." I don't claim to be an expert on the Bears and their offense, but Justin Fields is not doing so well on the year. 300 passing yards, 2 TDs, 4 interceptions. And no, that is not a typo. That is his stats in 3 games. Now, could that be affecting Byron Pringle's stats and why they're so low? Yeah. And then you have Demarcus Robinson, who was signed to the Baltimore Ravens. And so far, I don't know where he is in the pecking order, and he was a pretty late signing. So he's probably still learning the scheme, the playbook, all that stuff. But right now, he only has 3 receptions for 31 yards and a TD. Now, do you think the Ravens or the Raiders, who signed Demarcus Robinson before that, or the Bears, who signed Byron Pringle, Do you think they're beginning to realize that Patrick Mahomes elevates the strength, elevates the overall performance of the receivers around him? Do you think they're beginning to realize that? Byron Pringle getting signed to a $6 million deal? Holy smokes. I think it's laden with some incentives in there, but still. Then Demarcus Robinson getting signed in the offseason to the Raiders and then not even making the 53-man roster. And these were two wide receivers that we relied on in the passing game. I think it just goes to show how good Patrick Mahomes is. Whether you want to be happy, mad, sad, glad, upset with him in the offense right now based on their performance with the Colts, irrelevant. I bring this up to say Mahomes elevates his receivers and takes them to the next freaking level. And so far, these stats from Demarcus Robinson, Byron Pringle do reflect that. Now, D-Rob is still learning the system. Byron Pringle is in a not so great system right now, so it is what it is. But the Chiefs are a well-oiled machine, and the future is bright with Andy Reid at the helm and Mahomes throwing the freaking pigskin. Now, some AFC West news. I want to talk about injuries for a second because the Chargers have some crazy injuries, y'all. Listen to this. In yesterday's 38-10 loss to the Jags, the Chargers were hit with multiple devastating injuries, and these cannot be understated. Left tackle Rashawn Slater ruptured his biceps tendon. That's out for season, by the way. And wide receiver Jalen Guyton suffered a torn ACL, out for season. Edge rusher Joey Bosa left the game in the first half with a groin injury and did not return in the second half. Staley called the injury a, quote, serious one and said he's week to week. For now, Bosa is not going on injured reserve, which would knock him out for at least 4 weeks if he's eventually placed there. The injuries keep going, by the way. Quarterback Justin Herbert played through a fractured rib cartilage. He didn't suffer any setbacks, supposedly, Staley said Monday. I will say this. You're down by like 3 scores. Why do you keep an injured Justin Herbert in the game if you're clearly out of it? That is a very questionable coaching decision by Brandon Staley. Not the first one he's ever done. He is the reason why they are struggling as a team. It falls on coaching, but the injuries keep going. Cornerback J.C. Jackson was held out of the game because he's dealing with inflammation in the ankle he just had surgery on ahead of the regular season. Jackson played 100% of the defensive snaps in week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs, and Brandon Staley said he wasn't overworked in his Chargers debut Thursday night in Kansas City and hasn't suffered a setback. It's now just a matter of overcoming the inflammation. Guys, these are some crazy injuries. Wide receiver out for season, left tackle out for season, Joey Bosa, their premier edge rusher, out with a serious, it's described as a serious groin injury. J.C. Jackson, their number 1 corner and a huge offseason acquisition, is battling with inflammation in the ankle, the foot that he just had surgery on, in which they went in and removed a bone, an extra bone in his foot. So why am I telling you this? Why should you care? Because injuries make or break a team. If the injuries keep piling up on the Chargers, they are not going to be a threat in the West. Worth noting and worth keeping tabs on. Now, some more Chargers news. I'm bouncing back, but the Chargers safety Derwin James was not fined for his tackle on Travis Kelce. This is the play where Travis Kelce was kind of picked up by him and slammed down like they were playing WWE wrestling. A lot of people were hoping that he was going to get penalized for it. He didn't. So they were saying, well, I hope he at least gets fined for it. And he didn't. Now, my thoughts, I'm a little neutral on it. It is what it is. Travis Kelce did speak about it in a recent podcast with him and his brother. I think it's called New Heights, the New Heights podcast. And I'll play a clip of him talking about it right now.
I'm starting on the left side, outside the numbers, run around, Pat's doing his thing in the pocket, gets out of the pocket, rolls right. I catch the ball thinking that he threw me short, when in reality is I could have just turned up and ran to the pylon and got in the end zone. It's the worst thing. When you watch it on film and you're just kicking yourself in the head, I kind of deserve to get my power bomb. All of a sudden, he is on me like lightning. He surprised the shit out of me. I felt him wrap his arms around my legs. I'm chuckling in my mind. I'm like, this is not about to end well for me right now. I'm going up. What goes up must come down. In midair, I'm like, just hold on to the ball. I'm also, like I said, kind of chuckling like, man, I look like a WWE dummy right now.
You're not supposed to bounce on grass. You bounce.
The body slam was funny, but what was even more comical is the fact that he asked me after the play or after that drive. He's like, bro, you good?
So yeah, Kelce doesn't seem too upset about it. The league, obviously, for whatever reason, didn't feel like it was enough to fine him, and they didn't feel like it was enough to penalize him during the game. Were they right? Were they wrong? I don't know. I think they missed one, but not the end of the world. It would be different to me if Travis Kelce was injured. Well, let me know your thoughts on today's video, the AFC West news, the PFF grades, how Patrick Mahomes looks in his dropbacks, the offensive line, former Chiefs receivers, all that stuff. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below, and let's fight about it down there per usual. Make sure to sub, like, all that good stuff. If you enjoyed, make sure to check out this video here, which YouTube thinks you're really gonna like. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?